Hey guys, how's it going? My name is Phil. Welcome to Phil's Computer Lab. Today we're going back to the year 2005 and we're gonna check out the NVIDIA GeForce 7800 GTX in SLI. 2005 is a pretty special year to me. I just arrived in Australia, had my first job, bit of money in the pocket, and what you do, you go out and you build yourself a gaming machine. In that year, the forums were full with discussions about the Pentium 4 versus the Athlon 64, and I admitted I'm a big fan of the Pentium 4. However, by that time, with the socket 939 out and dual channel memory, if you were a gamer and you looked at the benchmarks, you wanted to go with an Athlon 64. Me being a bit of a tight ass, I went with a Sempron and I just overclocked it. Initially, I had a GeForce 6600 GT, but then I upgraded to a 19-inch LCD monitor with a 1280 by 1024 resolution. The card didn't cut it anymore. I went back to the shop and they sold me a GeForce 7800 GT, which just was released. I spent around 600 Australian dollars. That's quite a lot of money, and to this day, it is the most money I spent on a video card. So life as a budget gamer was pretty good. But you always dream of having something better. For example, a decent motherboard with an NVIDIA chipset which supports SLI, maybe a Athlon 64 4000 plus, or one of the FX processors, and of course, two 7800 GTX cards in SLI. So that's what this video is all about. We're going back to 2005 and I'm building a machine that I would love to have back in the day. Unfortunately, I ran into issues with the motherboard. I have an AMD motherboard and an FX processor all ready to go, however, it just wouldn't post. It turns out that the BIOS chip might be faulty, so I ordered a replacement, but I had to come up with another solution. So the only option I have is to go with Intel. This is my only other SLI motherboard I have. So let's have a look at some of the components in more detail. We're starting off with the motherboard. It's an Asus P5 ND2 SLI. It's got the LGA 775 socket and the chipset is from NVIDIA. It does support SLI and it's got this interesting configuration card which you need to swap around to tell the motherboard if you're using a single card or two in SLI. If you're using two cards in SLI, the speed of the PCI Express lanes will drop down to dual 8x instead of 16x on a single card. The BIOS chip is removable, which makes life easy in case something goes wrong. There's also an interesting Molex connector here, and when you're using two graphics cards, the red warning light here will actually light up and it only goes away when you insert the Molex power here. Something I noticed to do with the temperatures is that the voltage regulator module here gets very hot. So that's a bit of an issue with the cooling. I'm going to use a tower cooler. Back in those days, you usually had one of these sunflower coolers that would blow the air down and that would cool the chipset cooler and the voltage regulator cooler a little bit better. Now the chipset cooler gets extremely hot, too hot to the touch. So the processor we're using is the Pentium 4 670. This is a 3.8 gigahertz single core processor, but it supports hyper-threading and it's got 2 megabytes of cache, so quite an impressive processor. But this was really one of the final processors for Intel before switching over to the Core 2 Duo. For cooling, I'm using a Cooler Master TX3 Evo. It's a 3 heat pipe cooler with a 90mm fan and worked really well for this project. We have 2 sticks of Kingston HyperX DDR2 memory, 2 gigabytes each for a total of 4 gigabytes, and that's really the limit of Windows XP 32-bit. For storage, we've got a Western Digital 640 gigabyte SATA hard drive and a standard optical drive. And finally, the highlight of the video, 2 NVIDIA GeForce 7800 GTX in SLI. Now these cards are from Gainward and they are the golden sample edition, so they've got a slight overclock, but otherwise they look exactly like a standard reference version. They have 256 megabytes of video RAM, and the other cool thing is they are single slot video cards. You don't get these days. Most cards are dual slot or even triple slots, so that makes life a lot easier when using SLI. Both of them do require a 6-pin power connector as well. And we need a decent sound card, of course. This is the Sound Blaster X-Fi Titanium for the PCI Express interface. Really good sound card, especially if you're into 3D surround sound over headphones. You can use the EAX and the CMSS 3D technology, and a lot of games from 2005 take advantage of that technology. You had a quick look at all the parts, now it's time to put them all together. Okay guys, the machine is put together. Let's turn it on and see what it can do. Now that's a post screen. It tells you everything that's going on. Let's go into the BIOS and we're just gonna check that the processor shows up correctly. There you go. Pentium 4, 3.8 gigahertz and 2 megabytes of cache. Okay, let's boot into Windows. Here we go, we are on the desktop. Hopefully the image comes across fine in the video. Now, a couple of notes on the monitor. This is a 24-inch monitor with a 1920 by 1200 resolution. I've been using this monitor in a few videos. And the reason I like using this monitor is because it supports the 1600 by 1200 resolution. Now, 1600 by 1200 doesn't sound very impressive these days, but back in the day, this was like the 4K. This was the ultimate resolution, and all the games were tested in all sorts of resolutions, 1024 by 768, 1280 by 1024, and then finally at 1600 by 1200. So back in the day, that was something I wished I had. So let's have a look if the SLI configuration has the power to run that resolution well. So the first thing we're going to do is enable SLI. So you go to the NVIDIA control panel, and there's a setting for that. You have an option here. At the moment it's disabled, and you've got a little diagram here as well of your two cards, and you just select maximize 3D performance and press apply. Okay, it's time to look at some benchmarks. We're going to start with all the 3D marks. We've got 2001, and really there's not much difference between a single card and an SLI card. Moving on to 3D Mark 03, we can see a lot nicer scaling now, going from around 17,600 to just over 28,000. 3D Mark 05, a little bit of scaling, but not too much, 7,900 to 9,300, and these are the default settings. So I have run these benchmarks at a high resolution. You get more scaling, but I wanted to have the stock settings so you can compare the results better. And finally, we've got 3D Mark 06, and we're seeing a scaling from around 4,300 to around 6,000. Let's have a look at some games. We've got F.E.A.R, which runs at 1600 by 1200 with 4xAA and 16xAF. We see very tiny scaling from 62 to 65, so that's very likely a CPU limitation. The Pentium 4 was not that strong in F.E.A.R. Moving on to F.E.A.R. Now that game scales beautifully, and it's got some more information like minimum and maximum frames. So the second figure is the average frames, so we're going from 36 to 69, so that's a really nice boost. And F.E.A.R is likely the most demanding game out of the benchmarks we're looking at today. Then we've got Doom 3. There's also a bit of a scaling going on, but not too much. So we're going from 55 to 78. And finally, we've got Half-Life 2 Lost Coast. We're going from 57 to 87. And there you have it. Performance is pretty good. In all the games, we're getting at least 60 FPS. And remember, that's at 1600 by 1200 with 4x AA and 16x AF. So these are really high quality settings. And in my opinion, these games still look outstanding today. So going back to 2005, I was too much of a tight ass to buy something like this. It cost a lot of money. But these days, you can pick this up for little money and relive the good old days. It's a bit of a shame that the AMD motherboard didn't work, but at least we've got the results now. So once I've figured out the BIOS chip and hopefully that fixes the motherboard, I will definitely do another video. And that's really it for this video. Now, I just want to say regarding the SLI, the video title is First Time SLI. Now, I have used the 3DFX Voodoo 2 cards in SLI, but that's a slightly different technology. The SLI with the Voodoo card stands for Scan Line Interleaving, I believe, and the SLI for the NVIDIA stands for Scalable Link Interface. So they've picked the same name, used it from the 3DFX cards, which they bought the company when 3DFX went down the drain. But it has a different meaning and the technology is slightly different. So this was really my first time playing around with NVIDIA SLI. So let me know what you think. Have you used SLI before? What is your opinion on it? And if you haven't subscribed to my channel, please do so. Hit that like button and I'll see you soon in another video.